Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
Just a quick note for those who are joining us this evening, presenters and guests, please turn your camera off. The city and council are the only ones that will have their screens on for this meeting.
Hello, Jesse.
Well, it's 7 o'clock. Should we call this meeting to order?
Yeah.
City of North Kansas City, Missouri, regular council meeting and motion to close part of the meeting amended November 17th, 2020. Call roll.
Councilmember Clevenger,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Stewart,
Present?
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Farr,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember DeLong, Councilmember Saper,
Here.
Councilmember Smith,
Here.
Councilmember Tull,
Here.
Thank you. Let the record reflect that all members are present, except at the moment, Councilmember DeLong. Next item is the Pledge of Allegiance. Councilmember Clevenger, can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Sure. I pledge of allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America,
United States of America,
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty and
with liberty
justice for all.
and justice for all.
Thank you. The next item is the approval of the agenda, and I would like to note that item 10, the short-term conditional use permit for Sneaker and Vintage Flea Market has been withdrawn by request of the applicant. So with that, the approval of the agenda is before you.
So moved.
Second.
Councilmember Clevenger,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Stewart,
Yes.
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Farr.
Yes, ma'am.
I do see Councilmember DeLong logging in. I'm going to,
Councilmember DeLong, the consent agenda is before the council, and I did note that I attend the short-term conditional use permit application for the Sneaker and Vintage Flea Market has been withdrawn by the request of the applicant.
Approval of the agenda.
We're on approval of the agenda of item 4.
Councilmember DeLong,
Yes.
Councilmember Saber,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Tull,
Yes.
Thank you. Next item is comments from the public. And Ms. Nakahoto or Mr. Roberts, is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak tonight?
Mr. Berlin, there is. I'm going to first call on Joe Gower. Mr. Gower, please unmute
Yes.
yourself and you have,
Okay.
Please provide your public comment.
Sure. Thanks for allowing time for this. Over the last 24 hours, I've been getting in touch with folks like Chef Tito and Ron Bredemeyer from Helen's. And sorry, the comments I emailed off to you was such an 11th hour thing. We want to get the full River North board together, includes owners and representatives from Cinderblock, Chapels, Colony, and Iron District, and really kind of talk this through and what we want our response to be to deliberations tonight. So with the standards that we're looking at adopting, although we're talking about less than a half dozen businesses in town, these are still major effects that mean the world to their ability to survive the remainder of this pandemic. For argument's sake, I won't be including Chicken and Pickle, whose sheer volume puts them in a league all their own and whose revenue flows could absorb more of these changes than others, nor Neon Wild, since dance club operations during this time of pandemic, it's really kind of its own issue and should be discussed on its own. Also, Adam from Screenland has his own comments for tonight that I hope you consider, which differentiates patron behavior in his movie theater compared to bars and restaurants, and I hope you put consideration to that as well. So beyond that, we're really talking about the late night operations for 4 remaining businesses. And this is make or break decision stuff that's vital to these businesses' survival. American Fusion and Helen's cater to late night shift workers, providing food for service industry and frontline healthcare workers who work late. I think especially in those 2 cases, you risk throwing out a lot of late night food business from local storefronts and shifting it over to fast food chains that afford to have drive-throughs, really. On top of those 2 businesses who we feel will be hardest hit by a 10 p.m. forced closure, Fallen Jacks and Repeal 18th will both be forced to end their weekend hours by 3.5 hours. If I've missed anyone from this list, I have to shave back an hour or so on a week, and I apologize, but I want to zero in on how few actual locations there are in town that would actually need to be monitored for late night compliance restrictions. I mean, we're not sprawling, expansive Kansas City, Missouri we're talking about here. This is very easy to get our arms around. We're asking that the council take into consideration both the size of our enforceable jurisdiction and the few but important providers we have here in the 10 o'clock hour. Johnson County set their forced closure to midnight because they feel it's best for their own community of bars and restaurants and how they operate. There's a lot of nervous business owners right now, and so we ask that whatever is decided tonight is also reassessed upon reasonable benchmarks for infection rates and hospitalizations as they change in reaction to these measures. You know, we kept an open mind about how outbreaks can reverse in times of stricter measures, And we ask that we not commit to a set in stone blanket solution for this foreseeable future. And finally, we ask that the council deliberates on whether conforming to KCMO's curfew mandates out of principle alone are truly keeping our community safer, or do they help us feel safer at the expense of small compliant operators who are barely hanging on as it is? Thank you for your time.
Mr. Berlin, the next speaker is Screenland Armor.
Good evening, Council. Joe already mentioned a number of things, but I wanted to throw my hat in here to describe how this would impact our business, putting a 10 p.m. curfew on. So unlike a restaurant and bar, our patrons come to see a movie which vary in length, but the average movie time right now is 2 hours and 15 minutes. We have really essentially two shows at 2 times a day where we can start and stop movies. Our busiest times where we actually make money are between 6 and 7 and 9 and 10 p.m. If this enacted and forced all businesses to close by 10 p.m., it would essentially remove our ability to be open half of our business. I did a quick pull to some reports today to see what our sales have been in the last 14 days. In the last 14 days, 72% of our business occurred between 9 and 10:30 p.m. And if we get rid of this, in addition to our outdoor movies ending next week, we look to suffer 90 to 95% total losses. A restaurant could make business, people might go there. If we close bars at 10 o'clock, they might go a little bit earlier, but there's no getting in more movie times. So if this were to enact, it would essentially close us around 8:30 or 9 o'clock because we don't have a bar business. We don't have seating in the lobby for a bar. When people come to our establishment, they are forced distance because we have seating closed. If you haven't been to our theater, we have seats completely blocked off in every theater. Our occupancy is closer to 30%. And even with that 30% open seats, we're actually at any given time somewhere between like 10 and 25% filled. So, our busiest shows, you're looking at like 50 people spread across 4 auditoriums, which is about 14% of our total occupancy. So I do ask you consider the 12 o'clock, but also to remove us from any possible curfews, although they wouldn't really impact us after about 11:30 or 12 anyways. That's typically when movies end on weekends. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Mindy.
Good evening. Thank you, Joe and Adam. I have 2 parts to what I'm going to say, but I'll make it very quick for everybody. At Expressive, we are trying to maximize all of our time, and to have a 10 o'clock curfew would significantly limit our ability to do couples events, as well as some of the smaller birthday parties and so forth, because they would have to be done by 10 o'clock. We won't make rent for November, given the fact that I am recovering from COVID and have had to been out for half of this month. And so any income producing activity we can't do because of limitations would cripple our business. The other thing, in addition to the 10 o'clock for Expressive, is it is unclear whether or not we would be at the 10-person capacity or if we would stay at our 50%, which was the previous understanding. So language would need to be clear that we could be lumped in with the food and beverage entertainment venues and be at 50% capacity. Now, I will tell you, we've not been over 30% capacity since March because we do keep it very small for social distancing purposes, but being at 10 people would cripple us. 2 of my public relations clients, Chef Tito and Paul and Jax, I've talked to them both today. Joe also talked to them last night. Chef Tito in particular wanted me to speak from his heart this evening about what the negative impact of closing at 10 o'clock will be for his business. He's just now making it so that he's able to pay his employees, and he's put thousands and thousands of dollars into having a safe social distance place for people. The tent that is arriving in the next 10 days was a $25,000 investment to tent his entire patio. so that people that come to Chef Tito's can be socially distant. And he specifically wanted me to let you know that he's doing everything he can to protect his customers. And he's hoping that you won't cripple him by having this 10 o'clock curfew. Paul and Jack's is already struggling because of the limitations there, as Joe indicated. And we just need to keep these businesses going as long as feasibly possible, as long as there's not a significant outbreak here in North Kansas City that would indicate that we have to do something more drastic. We can always revisit this. So I implore you on behalf of my clients, but also on behalf of my business partner and I, that you really take some thoughtful, considerate, deliberate steps in how you come to this decision making and what language that you use as you put together whatever your order is going to be. Thank you so much for your time tonight.
Any attendees that would like to provide a public comment, please use the raise hand feature or *9 to indicate you would like to speak at this time. JD Price has indicated he would like to speak. JP?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to say something. I really appreciate it. I'm one of the 2 owners of Strong Barbell Club on 12th and Swift. And I first had a question, and maybe this is a rhetorical question. I don't know. It's not one that I know that anybody's going to answer right off, but I was just really curious about why shortening times that businesses are open, why that would seem to manage this or help in any way, because then you, in effect, shove everybody into the space for less time, making people more in contact with each other, instead of letting them spread out the time that they're there and ability to do business for longer. So that's one thing I'm very confused about. I was in Walmart one day and shoved to the front of the building to be in line shoulder to shoulder with 25 other people, instead of being able to run the store 24 hours and be able to be there when less people are available and less people are there. So I was curious about that. And then the only other comment that I had is in the last time that we had revisions to policy and guidelines, North Kansas City had taken a stricter stance on gyms and fitness centers and had more rules for us than they had in the rest of the core 4, as far as required to wear masks through physical activity, which has been denounced by the World Health Organization over and over now. So I was just curious about that. I'm really thankful that fitness centers aren't necessarily in risk of being shut down in this area so far that I've heard. But I just wanted to be heard on that, where it's pretty unsafe to be wearing a restrictive garment while you're lifting weights. And it's been proven that 0.0002% of people in gym check-ins nationwide have been able to link COVID to a gym check-in in America. So I was really curious about that as well and wanted to be able to address that.
If there are any members in the attendee area that would like to provide a public comment, please use the raise hand feature or hit *9 at this time. Mr. Berlin, I'm not seeing anybody raising a hand or indicating that they would like to provide a public comment at this time.
Thank you. Mayor and Council, I'm going to take a liberty, if I might. So I have just pressed send on an email. You may have already gotten this from another some other venue, but at 7:03 p.m. we did receive an email from Clay County Public Health. And if you don't mind, Kim has just put the order up. I'm going to read the email, which summarizes some of the new provisions, which Clay County indicates will be in effect beginning Monday, November 23rd. So I hope you'll indulge me because it seems apt given the comments tonight. So their email reads as follows. Good evening. The Clay County Public Health Emergency Order has been updated in order to provide consistency in the metro and join regional efforts to reduce the spread of COVID-19. The updates are in line with orders announced earlier this week by the City of Kansas City, Missouri, and Jackson, Wyandotte counties. The document can be found attached on our website, and Kim has put it in front of you. It's also attached to the email that I've just sent to you. Notable changes from Clay County's previous order include venues serving food and or drink indoors must operate at 50% capacity and close by 10 p.m. No groups of more than 10 people are allowed indoors or outdoors. Gyms, fitness, and recreational centers must also remain at 50% capacity or less, and masks are required for everyone inside. Masks are now required outdoors when physical distancing, 6 feet, cannot be maintained from anyone outside your household. The age exemption for wearing a mask is lowered to those 5 years of age and younger. Indoor gatherings are limited to a maximum of 10 people. Gatherings are groups of individuals who are not members of the same household, congregated together for a common or coordinated social, community, or leisure purpose. Gatherings of 10 or fewer are allowed with use of physical distancing between members of different households. Prohibited gatherings do not include non-event-based regular commercial, nonprofit, or educational activity by workers, students, or customers of businesses. Exceptions for gatherings over 10 people can be approved by public health. That would be Clay County Public Health. A submission form will be available at clayhealth.com by noon on Wednesday, November 18th. That is the summary that they sent of the updated emergency order, which was just issued a few minutes ago. So for your consideration as we move forward on tonight's agenda. And the next item on tonight's agenda is the consent agenda, which consists of approval of regular council meeting minutes from November 3rd, 2020, appointment to Equity and Inclusion Committee of Yvonne Salinas by Councilmember Clark, appointment to Equity and Inclusion Committee of Francis Rodriguez, and that's by Councilmember Smith, and proclaiming the day before Snake Saturday as Green Friday. Is there a motion? Councilmember Stewart.
I just questioned, number 8, is that a man or a woman?
Man.
Good, we got one. All right, just wanted to know. It could have gone either way.
He always comes to our meetings, used to pre-COVID, Franny Rodriguez.
Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion.
Second.
Will you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Clevenger,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Stewart,
Yes.
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Farr,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember DeLong,
Yes.
Councilmember Saber,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Tull,
Yes.
8-0, the motion carries.
Thank you. The next item is a presentation by Tom Jaron, the Executive Director of the Kansas City Streetcar Authority. We had a couple of council members who requested an update on the streetcar. So at this time, I will turn this over to Tom Jaron to make a presentation to you.
Hello, City Council. Tom Garand with the Kansas City Streetcar Authority. I want to thank the Mayor and Council and City Manager for the time this evening. I am going to run through a presentation, next slide please, and cover a quick overview of the Starter Line project for those who may not be super familiar, talk a little bit about expansion efforts currently underway, and then close with a brief conversation around future opportunities in question and answer. I realize you have a lot of business to complete, and so I will try my best to move through this quickly. Next slide. I think many of you may be aware, after fits and starts for literally decades, we were able to launch the streetcar starter line May 6th of 2016 after extensive failures and lots of literally blood, sweat, and tears. And it was really a monumental day, and it was a milestone, obviously, that was really the result of lots of hard work over a long period of time. Next slide. The route downtown was really designed to connect the four major entertainment areas and neighborhoods within the broader downtown area, and really help to redefine and connect our core together and serve as a backbone for economic development, growth, and really connectivity amongst these independent, unique but adjacent neighborhoods. And you see here on the map, River Market on the top, Downtown Business District, Crossroads, and then Union Station and Crown Center on the south end of the alignment. Next slide. The project that we built was $102 million. It was funded through a combination of federal and local sources, about $37 million federal, about $67 million in local funds, and those local funds were generated through a local sales tax and special assessment to help fund the local costs as well as ongoing operations. The streetcar broke ground in construction on the May 2014, and as I mentioned, opened May 2016. Next slide. The impact. Obviously, the transformation of downtown over this period of time has been fairly significant. And if you move to the next slide, I will show really the four objectives that we outlined as we started the project really were the things that we hope to accomplish. And it had to do, if you could move to the next slide, please. First, with obviously connecting people. We wanted to connect the neighborhood. We wanted to serve as a backbone for connectivity downtown. And over that period of time, we've carried over 8 million passenger trips. It quickly became the highest ridership transit route in the region, and obviously brought a whole new user base to public transportation and exposure for public transportation really region-wide. The second goal was around development. As mentioned, we really wanted to leverage this transportation investment to really put a stake in the ground to support ongoing private sector investment along the route, and really a refilling of the empty spaces that had been vacated over a number of decades. And over this period of time, we've seen a significant increase in both residential density as well as sales tax receipts to the general city coffers. But it wasn't just about supporting new development. It was really about supporting existing businesses that were pre-existing prior to streetcar. And what we found was that the added connectivity, the increased foot traffic, greatly benefited the existing businesses who added hours, who added staff, who changed menus, who expanded their operations in response to the growing demand over this period. And then lastly, it needed to be sustainable financially and obviously from a public perception standpoint. And we had a strong rate of public satisfaction and still carry that forward to this day. Next slide. And so just a few snapshots. We tend to have short memories. We forget just what a few years ago looked like. You all can appreciate the significant transformation in North Kansas City really over this same period. And the same holds true downtown. Really has been remarkable. Empty spaces that really frankly sat vacant for decades now have active, vibrant uses that are contributing to the vitality of downtown and the neighborhood. One more, I think, next slide. This is the project at 16th and Main, a surface parking lot. So again, just an illustration of over the years how these empty spaces are filling up with really, frankly, higher and better uses. But this was always intended to be just to start and really a demonstration of the possible of what we could do with transit, that people would ride it, that it would induce economic development. And so we pretty quickly pivoted to expansion. And so I'll transition on the next slide to really an overview of expansion efforts that have really been bolstered in the last 60 days by two significant announcements for federal funding to support a southern extension to the University of Missouri-Kansas City, as well as a shorter northern extension to the Berkeley riverfront. And next slide, I believe there's a map that demonstrates the downtown alignment in blue, as well as the northern extension again to the riverfront and the southern extension to UMKC. So these are the two active projects that we're actually currently advancing project development and preparing for construction. Both of these will be under construction in the next 12 to 18 months. And both of these projects are now fully funded with significant federal support. The northern extension is going to be paid for approximately by 75% of the resources coming from federal sources. So it's about a $20 million project, and the southern extension will be supported by 50% of the resources, almost $175 million coming from federal discretionary grant programs that we've been able to capture. Next slide. I think I've got a few renderings of really how we're going to extend this beyond downtown to be what we always thought it could be, which is a spine for a regional transit system. So we're transitioning from a downtown circulator to really a spine of a regional system that will connect regional bus routes, east-west transit services through Midtown, southern transit services connecting Johnson County and South KC. And then obviously, as we move to the north, northern connections and connections to Wyandotte County and East Kansas City as well. I think there's another picture following this of the Country Club Plaza. We're going to have a multimodal transit center, as I mentioned, connecting to regional transit routes on the south, as well as obviously connection to the University of Missouri, Kansas City, which will really be a tremendous asset for the connectivity of the overall system and the university itself. So really is going to take the feel of more of a light rail operation as we get to the south with larger platforms, with more capacity, serving more routes than just the streetcar itself. And then the next slide is a illustration of the riverfront extension. So we have a short extension north to Berkeley Riverfront. This has really helped to help bridge the divide that currently exists, that really challenged the riverfront from being fully connected to the rest of the downtown core. And with railroad tracks and topography and a bridge that has neither bicycle or pedestrian accommodations. So we're excited about this short extension. Will help to bolster also the economic and redevelopment efforts of the riverfront and connect the riverfront as really an asset for the rest of the downtown area. Will be directly connected. But again, these are the two funded projects that we have currently ongoing, but there's a handful of others. And the next slide, I just have two more slides and then I'm happy to take questions. I'm sorry. There's the riverfront again, one more beyond this. And so beyond these two funded extensions, these projects take years to advance. And we're always thinking about how do we scale the system? Where do we go? What are the long-term goals and plans? And how do we position ourselves for significant investment, federal, local, and otherwise, that can help realize significant improvements for our system here in the Kansas City region? And over the course of the last really 6 years, or even longer, more like 8 years, we conducted some studies to look at a variety of corridors that would build off of these extensions that I just mentioned and carry the system further. The first is the Next Rail study, which has a number of corridors in Jackson County shown on this map that all have potential, have been studied. Some have more viability than others, but all have potential for future streetcar extension. And then more applicable to North Kansas City is our North Rail analysis that we conducted in partnership with the city of North Kansas City back in 2014. And I think I've got a slide on that if we go to the next slide, where we looked specifically at the opportunities to cross the Missouri River, and we looked at a host of alternatives. This study is still on our website and available, but there were a few things that we discovered through that partnership and that effort. The first and foremost was that there is a viable, feasible Northland extension that exists on this route, and that is along the Heart of America Bridge. We looked at a variety of alignment alternatives. For those of you who were around back in 2014, Burlington then was identified as the preferential route for a variety of reasons. And we also discovered, not surprisingly, that the costs were significant and that there would be, it would require some creative thinking in terms of not just local, but perhaps state or federal resources to make that, or regional funding mechanisms to make that project viable. Well, a lot has happened since 2014. I can say I first became familiar with the city of North Kansas City around that time frame, and can attest to the transformation that you all have seen really firsthand. So, next slide. I think I'm going to conclude by saying there's more recommendations in the study about things that can be done if there is interest in moving this forward or picking this conversation up where we left off. The three things that are really paramount to any of the quarters that we've talked about is public support and interest from not just elected leadership, but the community. We've historically gone where we're wanted. So public support and interest is a criteria. Technical feasibility, which I've already spoken to, is a criteria, and then obviously financial feasibility. And it really is, those are the three legs of the stool. And so the first probably being the most important because we can be creative in solving some of these other problems if there's a will. So that's sort of the history. I'm happy to talk more about what we've done downtown or about our history with North Kansas City and the evaluation of that Northland corridor. But I will stop talking and be happy to take questions.
So, Tom, I apologize for mispronouncing your name at the outset. Any questions from Mr. Garand? Councilmember DeLong.
I was going to comment. First of all, congratulations on your recent success with all the federal grant money going in to help with the Main Street and Riverfront extensions. We've definitely seen a lot of benefit downtown derived from the streetcar so far, and I wouldn't expect anything less to happen along the Main Street extension either. This is definitely the most frequent question I get since I've been on City Council. When are we going to get the extension? When are we going to get the extension? When are we going to get the extension? And so, I was really hoping tonight was a way that, we get a better idea of where we currently stand and what it takes to fire that conversation up again and what it takes to have these conversations. So, thank you for the presentation and hopefully it's a conversation we can get going again.
Well, I would say, obviously, this is a huge first step in just opening the dialogue and sort of picking back up and remembering the work that we've already conducted. I will say this, that these projects don't happen by accident. The Main Street Extension Project, the Riverfront Extension Project, the Downtown Starter Line. They took a strong base of support and interest, some effort, and really getting in line and doing the work. Some of the things on the list that we've already done, this project is already in the Mid-America Regional Council Long-Range Transportation Plan. It is envisioned as a long-term opportunity, but there is work obviously that would be necessary to pick up the due diligence and to have some additional conversation. And then the last thing I would say is we've historically as a region missed opportunities to bring federal funds back to our region to build these kinds of projects. And the example on Main Street South, where we're bringing $150 million in federal money to help build that project, is because we did our due diligence. We got people together and we advanced a plan that was feasible and we could compete with projects from around the country. That particular program, our state of Missouri hasn't received an award through that federal program since the mid-1990s when St. Louis was building out their MetroLink. So these are funds that are going to other systems around the country to build out their projects. And it's great we've got an opportunity to bring some of that resource back to Kansas City for building out our system.
I was going to follow up. So we've already talked about this before, but for everyone else, how long does it generally take from beginning to end to complete? From say a conversation tonight to the moment someone can step on a streetcar in North Kansas City.
So we did planning for the Downtown Starter Line in 2011 and we opened in 2016. And so 5 years, and that was record setting pace. We're, we've been 2 to 3 years into the Main Street Extension South and our grand opening date still is scheduled for about 2025. So that's a much bigger project, a much more challenging project, obviously. Scale matters here. But 5 years is an aggressive timeline, Councilman.
Thank you. Definitely, it's interesting because we got to get across the bridge. That seems to be the one major hurdle is working with Kansas City, Missouri, us, and then MoDOT as well as the Streetcar Authority. So, but I definitely look forward to having these conversations. I feel like the appetite is still there. So hopefully we can continue on. Thank you.
Councilmember Smith and then Councilmember Saper.
All right, my internet's very glitchy right now, so if I cut out, just skip me. Thanks, Tom, for the presentation. I know we've discussed a couple times previously. Have we worked out any of the speed situation? Are we able to go a little bit faster on larger extension routes than we do downtown?
Yeah, so the cars have the capability of going 50 miles an hour. And it really is a matter of the environment. Are they dedicated right of way? What's the frequency of the station stops? Those sorts of things. Other traffic, how's it designed? Downtowns was never designed to be higher speed, obviously. It was more of a pedestrian connector, more of a local connection. As we extend from downtown, obviously the context changes. So we would expect the performance characteristics to change as well.
Very good. Thank you.
Councilmember Saper.
Yeah. Is a North Kansas City only extension really feasible, considering that we have this 1.5 mile dead zone before we get to North Kansas City from 5th Street South to 10th Street North? And would there actually be any kind of federal funding with that kind of limitation?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, we think one of the things that's unique about, so one, we do think there is a potential opportunity here because the river is a major divide because, you know, back in 2014, we weren't looking at the horizon of a new Buck O'Neill Bridge that was going to conceivably divert some, you know, a fairly significant proportion of forecasted traffic on Burlington in future years. So there's a few big things that are changing the course of what Burlington, how it may function, and what the needs may be in the years to come. But no, we think there's opportunity. It's not easy. Clearly, it is a state-owned bridge. MoDOT would have to be a key partner in this effort. But our prior analysis indicated there was capacity, and obviously it's about getting it far enough where it really serves a useful purpose and there's utility for users.
How far?
Well, we evaluated in the prior study a few different options as you know, obviously the costs vary, you know, and we were focused solely on North Kansas City. So we really looked at Armour and really 32nd Street, I believe, if I'm remembering right, as the two target locations where you might phase an initial Northland extension over the river through a good portion, if not all, of North Kansas City before you sort of tee up for a next phase that would extend beyond North Kansas City.
Councilmember Cho.
Thank you for coming to speak to us. I can say in our area, in our ward here, there is a lot of interest. To get the question a lot, and is it going to happen? And people are so excited. So how do we effectively show that interest? Would we need to start directing people to contact our city officials, your city officials? How do we get the ball rolling?
Well, the first thing, Councilwoman, I would suggest is, and we'd be happy to circulate the plan that we approved in 2014 and developed. There's some recommendations in that plan that some of which we've advanced on a regional level. A few of them are targeted at local actions. So for instance, does the North Kansas City comprehensive plan or plan reflect the streetcar as a preference and a mode? And is it a component of a city approved plan? So there's a few local actions there that making sure obviously it's integrated with your broader vision would be things that would be logical. And then obviously as part of that local action and even consideration, we could be advancing conversations in parallel with your staff on what the opportunities for picking back up due diligence, coordination with MoDOT, and a few of the other technical needs would be.
Okay, and I assume that has to all be in place prior to going after these federal loans or grants, I mean, is that correct?
Correct. There's a planning effort. So we did a conceptual plan. The general process would be to formalize a preferred alignment. So we would likely, given the length of time we need to revisit the alignment preference in the project, update the definite, the assumptions around things like cost, have the city approve that and advanced an environmental study, which is really the prerequisite for most of the federal grant application. And that's something we've done on the other projects as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions for Mr. Garand? Councilmember Stewart?
Yeah, back in 2014, did you get any estimates on crossing the river by any chance?
I'm sorry, Councilman, I missed your question. I didn't.
Back in 2014, when they was looking at Burlington and Swift, and then they decided to be Burlington if it came across. Did you get any quotes back then on the price to cross the river with a streetcar?
It was approximately the bridge modifications. I want to say this has been 2014, was about $25 million in bridge related costs is my recollection. But I would need to pull back up the feasibility study and become more acquainted with it. But I believe that's the number that's coming to mind.
I bet it's changed a lot since 2014. Unfortunately, I love streetcars, but and then it seemed like the Kansas City route cost roughly $50 million a mile, and we would have a mile if we probably went from 9th Street to because our city limit's not 10th Street. To 32nd Street, then turn it back around. But anyway, I mean, I love the idea. It had to be a whole lot of federal money for us, you know, and that's the problem back then when we just didn't even consider it. I think if I remember right, it was something like go to 32nd Street, $30-some million. And I don't think that must not included the river. So, but anyway.
And it's not uncommon to obviously, you know, other regions find a way to scale their systems, and they typically do it by multiple sources and on a broader scale. So my expectation would be, Councilman, if we were to get back into this, we would be having conversations with MoDOT, with federal partners, with a broader regional conversation about how we're expanding systems to find the resources that would be necessary. It likely, understandably, wouldn't all come from one jurisdiction necessarily.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping the conversation could move forward for long, because it takes, as you just heard tonight, it takes so many years to get it done. So anyway, thank you very much for your study.
You're welcome.
Anything else from any council members on this? All right, well, Mr. Garand, thank you very much for your presentation tonight and for taking these questions.
Thank you.
Item 12, new Kansas City, Missouri COVID-19 guidelines.
Thank you. So as I'm sure you know, the city of Kansas City issued new COVID-19 guidelines yesterday, and a number of other jurisdictions here in the metro have followed suit. And as you heard, Clay County just tonight also issued some new guidelines that will be effective Monday, the 23rd. I would note that those guidelines will be effective in North Kansas City. The city council could take stronger measures, which would take precedence, but whatever guidelines Clay County puts in place would affect North Kansas City. So now before you are for any direction you might want to give are the question of whether you would like to put any new guidelines in place. Councilmember Smith.
First, a question. So now that the Clay County guidelines came out at, of course, 703, are we able to roll any of that backwards, or do our rules supersede them either way, or can we only make them stricter?
You can only make them stricter.
The 10 p.m. curfew is what it is.
It is what it is in Clay County, which includes North Kansas City. Yes, sir.
There's nothing that we as a council can do to supersede that rule.
Mr. Barzee, you're on the call if you'd like to voice another opinion, but that is my understanding, is that we cannot make the restrictions weaker in Clay County, only stronger.
That is correct. Mr. Berlin is correct.
So oh my gosh. Okay. So I spent basically from when the agenda, like from when we first heard about these restrictions, I've been talking with business owners. I've been talking with a lot of people to figure out how this is going to play, and working on curfews specifically. And Clay County just shows up at the 11th hour. Okay. All right. First question then, with Screenland Armor. So Adam Roberts commented publicly, they are not a bar or a restaurant. And so I feel like they're a little bit different. They've also been doing everything as by the book as possible. They've been adapting. They've been doing everything right. So in my opinion, and I would ask the council to opine on this as well, I would see them as different in those types of businesses, because people come in, they sit down, and then they start the movie. If they start a movie before 10 o'clock, they can finish the movie. That would be my thought on Screenland Armor. Otherwise, we're essentially closing them down. So that's first thing. Got a whole lot of other notes on curfew related things, but that's out the door. So a couple other thoughts. Indoor, outdoor, group setting, there's the requirement for masking. I want to make sure that this is clear that that includes playing pickleball, because people running around without masks, playing pickleball, they're going to have to go ahead and put those on. The other process that I've had some discussions with Chief Freeman and with Eric about is enforcement. So what I would like to propose is to have a centralized complaint process. Because right now, if I'm out and I see somebody or see a blind fools, I don't like, I can call myself because I get a word into the city administrator, but in the general public, we need to find some place that they can make a call, or at least point them in the direction of a call center if it exists, or a person to reach out to. Because I know the police will respond to the complaints, but they're not out being the masked police around town. So if we could have a centralized spot where people could register those complaints, that could streamline the enforcement process. In line with enforcement, I had some stuff on curfews that would line up with that. If somebody puts in a report, it gets investigated. There would need to be some kind of warning, which I think is already happening. And then after that, what do we do if non-compliance continues? Do we level a fine on the business because they're not requiring people to do what we've ordered? Or do we pull a business license in an extreme case? So these are things that I'd like to hear opinions on. I would like to see the medical exemption removed. It's too big of a loophole at this point. These are, again, open for discussion, but I would like to see that done away with. If people are truly have a medical condition that doesn't allow them to wear a mask, they might not should be out exposing themselves to possible coronavirus infection. That's something that Costco has already done. They've removed the medical exemption. And then I'd like to know from Mr. Barzee, how would this apply, if at all, to religious organizations in town? Because if we're shutting businesses down at 10 o'clock, if we're doing all these other things, but we're allowing churches to meet in person at whatever capacity they choose, it seems disingenuous to what we're trying to do and protect the public. So anybody can respond to any of that. Thank you.
And if you don't mind, can we try to answer Mr. Smith's questions, and then maybe we can move on to other council members, or would you like to continue? We could have the debate if you like, and then we can try to, I'll take down the questions. We can try to answer them. I'll go ahead and call on Councilmember Stewart and then Councilmember Tall.
Some of it, just like Jesse said, it was new now since Clay County's forcing our hand. But I do want the businesses to know, especially the ones that spoke tonight, that I've been thinking about this ever since we got the email. And, you know, exposure to COVID is not dictated by a clock. You know, I totally disagree with the timing, the time limit. There's no more chance to catch COVID at midnight than it's 10 o'clock. It all depends on the people wearing their mask and keeping the distance. They could be open 24 hours a day and not the clock doesn't affect it. It's what you do. Like the theater, it's spaced out. the restaurants, you got to wear the mask until you start eating. You know, if you apply to everything and you do what you're supposed to do, that clock doesn't mean anything to me. And I couldn't keep up with that Clay County thing as it scrolled through the screen. How does this affect the casinos?
Well, sir, unless you directed us otherwise, first of all, we would say that the casinos have to close at 10 o'clock, just like any other venue. I think we would also, unless you directed us otherwise, interpret, well, the Clay County directive. Kansas City's directive spoke of everyone must be seated. I'm not seeing that on Clay County's directive.
It's
so
in there. It's in Clay
is
County.
it in there? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. I was only looking at, I haven't had a chance to review it, but
It's under
if that's the case, then we would say that, you know, for certain activities at the casino that such as playing poker or blackjack where you're seated, those would be permissible, but that the activities that would involve standing, such as playing the slots, would not be allowed. That's how I think we would interpret it, unless you told us to interpret it otherwise.
But we have already declared we cannot change what is written. I mean, you're telling us
Yes.
we can change it, but we can't.
No, I mean, there's always matters of interpretation, but we would interpret it strictly. So I do think that that's how we would probably discuss with the casino what could and couldn't be done. Was that anything that involves standing would not be permitted.
Well, I know for a fact that standing down there, if I go down, I don't stand, but you know, all the crap tables are standing. That's the only thing I think you have to stand. Everything else has a seat. And they have kept the distance, but not the crap tables. So I don't know. I mean, I imagine this could very well shut down the casino. Just like it's going to, you know, shut down some smaller businesses. I don't disagree with mask distance, keeping the distance, keeping the attendance down to a certain percentage. But that time, you know, it just makes no sense to me. That's it.
Councilmember Tall.
Before I say anything else, I just want to get out there because there seems to be a misperception that our area is not being effective as heavily as other areas. And not all people were in on this meeting, but public officials were able to meet with a North Kansas City Hospital representative. And I just want everyone to know that we are in a dire situation, okay? It's not other places, it's here too. They've already hired extra nurses that are contract workers and paying them a lot. And I wish it was a problem that we could fix with money, but we can't. The problem is they're running out of staff. So even if they have beds, they don't have the staff. So I just wanted to put that out there before I kept going forward. I agree with what's been said about the time limit. That doesn't make sense to me either. It doesn't, just like Councilmember Stewart said, you can catch it at 4:30 as easily as you can at midnight. But I think the big problem that we've had before and continue to have and will continue to have is enforcement. So back to what Jesse was talking about. None of this means anything if we aren't able to enforce it. And if we don't enforce it, everything is going to be shut down eventually. I mean, that's just where we are. So I would like to have some discussion about enforcement. As far as the movie theater, I agree with what's already been said. If they close their doors at 10 o'clock to new people coming in, then if you're already in there at the movies, you should be able to finish the movie. You know, the casino is also a hotel. So I don't know. I haven't had time to read through. I just followed along with you, Eric. I don't know what Clay County says about that, but it is also a hotel, and that may give us some wiggle room with their rules. So those are my thoughts for now.
Councilmember Clevenger, and then Farr, and then Clark.
Pretty much everything's been said that I was going to say. My question is, as far as these Kansas City guidelines, so any casinos in Kansas City, this is going to affect them to where they have to close at 10 o'clock as well? Or is that something that, you know, we should see how they're going to handle that situation with our casinos? Because I mean, I can't see them closing their casinos at 10 o'clock maybe, but I mean, is that what your interpretation is that they're going to close their casinos at 10?
I would presume so, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Farr, and then Clark, and then Saper.
Eric, if I was listening to you correctly, it said that any venue over 10 people, as long as you were not underneath the same household, had to be specially recognized by the health whoever. So does that mean then we can't have Thanksgiving in our own houses?
No, sir, I believe these are public.
That's not the way you interpreted it. It said,
Well, I'm only reading, sir, but as a matter, as a practical matter, that it's not enforceable.
Yeah, there will be no enforcement for that, but that is what it's suggesting, not to have Thanksgiving with people in your house. Yeah.
Anything over 10 people.
Councilmember Clark, and then Councilmember Saper.
Yeah, to echo just everyone's, I also agree that the timing, because knowing that even Johnson County is extended to midnight, obviously that hits us hard. There are people that are being so compliant in our small city. But I will say there are plenty of people that are not being compliant. There are chefs and cooks that are openly on social media without a mask, joining tables for pictures, handing out food, not wearing a mask at all. This is the behavior that got us where we are each time. It's like we all want to say, no, we promise we're going to play by the rules right now. We'll try harder. But these groups, what happens is it's like our weakest link makes it no fun for everyone, because then these other businesses have to pay the price for being so set up and so buttoned up and trying to follow all the rules and do everything they can to warn their patrons. They can't come in without wearing a mask. And I know, but it's the time we're in. It's not just our city. It's the time we're all living in. But there are literally people that are still not wearing their mask and cooking food and handing it out, and business owners that are doing this. And it's shown online. I've seen the pictures. I could openly share some of those, but I think that's the growing frustration for me is I don't want to see this for anybody. I hate this for businesses. But we obviously, to everyone's point, it's kind of been made up for us. I would like to see some, I don't want to say flexibility for Harrah's, but I get where we want to explore that. I agree that we want to close off new business to Screenland Armor. If they've got people already into the show before that 10 p.m. cutoff, that makes sense to me. I think that's my only thought is just, again, the overemphasis that we've been preaching since probably March when this all started, when everybody was still thinking it's a joke. But here we are at another huge peak when other countries are in the clear, essentially. And it's all behavior based. Everything that's happened has happened in the community. Sitting with the CEO of the North Kansas City Hospital, he flat out said, I haven't really had any cases of my nurses that actually work in the COVID unit have not gotten COVID in the 7 months they've been in that unit. It's coming from outside in the community. It's community behavior. That's all I want to say.
Councilmember Saper, and then Councilmember Smith.
Number one, it is spiking enormously, and something has to be done, which is why actions are being taken. Number two, none of us have had a chance to read the full detailed Clay County order. Number three, that order is in place, and no matter what we do, it's in place. I suggest that we maybe schedule a hopefully short special meeting next week to see if there's, after we've studied it, to see if there are any possibilities of slightly tweaking it to meet some of the needs. Probably not. We're going to have to live with it.
Councilmember Smith, and then Councilmember Tall.
DeLong's got his hand up too.
Excuse me, Councilmember Smith, and then DeLong, and then Tall.
Okay.
Raise your hands high, folks, so I can tell. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so 10 p.m. If that's what we're living with, I'll say it. That kind of sucks because it got dropped on us at the last second. I would also interpret that. So we've kind of got out. People seem to agree with the Screenland interpretation. If they're in at 10, finish the movie. What about curbside to go after 10 p.m.? Is that something that people can do? Because I'm thinking about a place like Helen's where most of their business happens late night. Like that's when they make most of their money. So we're either going to shut all of our local places down and then anywhere where the drive-through is going to continue to operate, or we could allow them to do curbside to go closed to the public. Is that something that it would work with the order? It seems to me that we could allow that.
I've written that down, sir, and we'll try to address that here. But I'll go ahead and keep on calling on folks. Councilmember DeLong and then Councilmember Tall.
I mean, yeah, with Clay County's order, this is more opinion piece than it is policy at this point. But I'd agree, 10 p.m. did seem somewhat arbitrary. And then I definitely hope Screenland and some others can get a little clarification on the rules. Outside of that, no, I'd agree with the enforcement piece as well. And did you ever answer Councilmember Smith's question to like a central place to report this? Like if we had a number and email? Maybe I missed the answer.
I did not answer it, but we can easily do that. Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah, because I saw Kansas City had a line, but of course that was going to their, possibly I think their health department or going through the 311 center. But I figured we could set some sort of.
We can establish a phone point of contact and an online point of contact.
Yeah,
yes,
certainly don't want to overburden our police dispatch with.
Right.
Every single little infraction, but definitely want a place where people, when they see stuff, can report it. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Councilmember Tall.
A couple of things. One thing that is in this that helps us is that we can get Clay County Department of Health. So before when we were talking, we don't have our own Department of Health, but now that it's coming from them, people can apply for an exemption or to change the rules on their website. So that's a positive thing. I was going to echo what Jesse said. If drive-throughs remain open, if they're allowed to be open, then I would think curbside, contactless, open your trunk curbside could also be allowed. And I would definitely push for that. Oh, sorry, I almost forgot the last thing. I know we've said it and we breezed past it and we can't change this, but I really do think we need to have a meaningful conversation about how to make sure that this is happening. And something that I've thrown out, and it may or may not get traction, is I feel like our city could use a social worker for other things than just COVID, for drug-related issues, prostitute issues. But in this particular case, I think monitoring places like this, not in a punitive way, not sending in your police department necessarily, I think we could find a position where people could come in to educate, pass out masks, make sure that you're 6 feet apart, your groups are less than 10. So I just want to make sure that when we're looking at how are we going to enforce this, that we get all the ideas out there. I think this is something we can do, and I think we should do it sooner rather than later if we're going to have another meeting to set that up.
Councilmember Smith.
I wanted to make sure I responded to a couple of the public comments. So Mindy asked about the 10 people. Mindy, you would be at 50%, not the 10. 10 is for gathered groups, groups that come together, no more than 10, or groups in homes. So that would be at 50%. And then we got some messages on the chat and from JP Price with Strong Barbell Club. I understand that the WHO has issued saying not to wear masks while working out. But the CDC also says that you should wear a mask during physical activity, including intense activity. If the mask gets wet, put on another mask. If you're indoors, you need to have a mask on. They encourage people to go outside and exercise if at all possible. So guys, I'm sorry. I know this is tough for your businesses, but we're going to keep that mask order in place because we can't do anything about it now with the county anyways. But we've had that for a while, and that needs to stay in place.
So I can attempt to address, or the staff can attempt to address some of the questions, or I don't know that we're going to resolve them, but but I want to make sure that, or are there any other council member comments for the moment? All right. Tom Barzee, I'm going to maybe put you on the spot. If you can address these, please do. And if you don't feel you can, or you need some more time to do some research, then you might let the council know that. But one question that was asked was in terms of the penalty for non-compliance. My understanding of the ability that the city has with regard to that is that we can write a summons, but that we do not really have the ability to revoke a business's license for non-compliance. So it would still be that that would be my assumption for the moment. Do you have any comments about that, Tom?
No, I agree with you actually on that, Eric, that we can absolutely write a GOS. And I had that conversation with the city attorney, our prosecutor, if you will, late this afternoon when I realized that this was going to be discussed this evening. And but that would be the approach that would be taken. The person therefore has a right to be heard on it, and just like any other matter. And per the ordinance that was passed by the city council, I believe it was June the 30th of ordinance 9315, the penalty clause allows for the court to fine someone that does not comply with an order issued by the mayor of the city, which was authorized under the same ordinance, a fine of between not less than $25 and not more than $500, or by imprisonment for a period of time not less than 1 day and not more than 3 months. Okay, so there is a penalty clause, and we both believe that that can in fact be enforced.
Councilmember Saper.
Since this is a Clay County order, does that supersede our previous order in place?
Clay County does have the ability to close down a business. So if this was,
Yeah.
if a failure to comply was reported to Clay County, they would have that authority. But
And since it's their order, they would be the enforcement arm, I would assume.
Well, I guess tonight we're talking about whether North Kansas City wants to issue any further orders. But yes, under Clay County's order, they would have that authority to do that.
Correct.
Yeah. The next question, Tom, that I have written down that I think Councilmember Smith asked was, could the city of North Kansas City remove the possibility of a medical exemption for wearing masks? Is that anything that you'd be willing to comment on?
That could be taken out. Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
Now, understand this, though, that the same rule would apply. Someone could be written up for violating it. They would appear in court, and if they produced actually medical evidence and we were satisfied under the ADA that that would apply, then the case would probably be dismissed. But it's not just, again, Mr. Bologna and I discussed that on the phone today as well. And it's not just anyone just saying to someone, oh, I got a medical reason, therefore I don't have to comply, and somebody walk away. You can absolutely go ahead and give them the GOS. All I'm saying is that it is possible that it could end up being dismissed, but that would be on a case by case, and certainly would require some proof on their part. So it would be different than what we have. And yes, we both agree that it can be eliminated and removed from our ordinance.
Any questions about that?
Excuse me, not our ordinance, from any order that the mayor may enter. Excuse me.
Yes, sir. All right. Another question that was asked by Councilmember Smith: would the rules on assembly apply to religious organizations? Is that something you'd be willing to comment on?
I'll be glad to comment on it. Here's the thing. I know this when we had the problem, when this got reared its head back earlier this year, back in March and April, that there was a case. And I'd like to think that I'm a genius and I can remember all this stuff, but I happened to pull it up. And I will say this, Chief Justice Roberts stated it was a religious liberty case that came to the U.S. Supreme Court, and the lower court had ruled that it did apply to religious entities, and the Chief Justice affirmed that, and he said this is what he said, our Constitution principally entrusts the safety and the health of the people to the politically accountable officials of the states to guard and protect. When those officials undertake to act in areas fraught with medical and scientific uncertainties, their latitude must be especially broad. Where those broad limits are not exceeded, they should not be subject to second guessing by an unelected federal judiciary, which lacks the background competence and expertise to assess public health and is not accountable to the people. Now, I got to tell you something though, folks. That was decided in the Supreme Court by a 5-4 majority, okay? One of the 5 is Justice Ginsburg, and she has been replaced by someone else. So I am advising you that I don't have a firm, hard answer to the question on what it might be today, because the new justice on the Supreme Court may side with Justice may decide, side with the dissenters, Justices Kavanaugh, Thomas, Gorsuch, and I believe it was Alito. Okay, so I don't know if that gives you a lot. Plus, I want to say one last thing on this. I have not yet read the Clay County order. And if the Clay County order has an exemption, I guess we could make it more difficult. But I would probably advise you on that to follow whatever the Clay County order would be. And candidly, I don't remember seeing anything specifically about religious organizations, if you will, and church activity, church worship services in the Kansas City order. But again, I have not studied it thoroughly.
I don't believe it's addressed in the Clay County order one way or another. Councilmember Smith and then Councilmember Tall.
Thanks for that. I want this to apply to religious organizations under the same rules that the businesses are being held to. If I appreciate your background there, Tom, the Supreme Court ruled that it was okay. I don't want to speculate on what the new court might do. As long as we're allowed to do it, I think that that should be the case. Churches should be subject to the same restrictions that these businesses have. 50% max, social distance, wear your masks.
Councilmember Tall.
I agree. And I was just going to say, if that's what the Supreme Court had already voted on, then that is the rule until they change the vote. So I would support that as well.
Councilmember DeLong.
And I don't believe it's specifically outlined in Kansas City, Missouri's order, but if I do recall, I think that was asked and answered at Quentin Lucas' press conference the other day. And I believe the intent was for yes, this to apply to those areas. That might be something to go back and kind of get some idea of what the intent, at least of theirs, was.
Yeah, and I would probably,
which this appears to mirror.
I would just say, I would probably, excuse me, Councilman, I would probably say that their failure to include it, assuming that's the case, is significant, which means they are not exempt. I would have guessed that they would have put an exemption in there if that was their intent.
Correct, and I believe that's the case that they were making, is that it falls within one of these other gathering sections, I think.
All right, so based upon the discussion we've heard so far, I think we would say at staff level that yes, it is enforceable for assemblies of churches, etc. If I may, with regard to the screenland armor, there are aspects of this which are subject to interpretation based upon what the council has indicated tonight. I think we would interpret it in the manner that you've suggested, which is that as long as they stop serving and people are seated, they can continue to watch a movie until it's done and then would need to leave. Unless city councilor has another opinion, I think we would tend to interpret this order in that way. The Clay County order. Curbside to go, I think, again, I'll venture an opinion, which is that curbside to go would continue to be allowed after 10 o'clock. I think that the intent of the order was to prohibit, gatherings in restaurants, bars, etc. after 10 o'clock, but that curbside service would not fall under that. Unless
Yeah,
I hear an object. Yes, sir.
The way that's worded is those establishments that have indoor dining must close at 10, but they didn't say close indoor dining. It's very odd language. So I think we go with the open interpretation there and allow them curbside.
Unless council has a different opinion, we would agree with you on that. We would interpret it that way.
I'd agree, because I think it specifically says serving food and drink indoors. So as long as that's not what your model is at that point, then I don't see how you would fall under closure at 10.
You know, the other items that I have written down are enforcement and hiring of a social worker. With regard to enforcement, you know, our procedure has been, we deal with these on a complaint basis. If we get a complaint, and we would certainly set up some kind of a centralized telephone line and online way of communicating these to us, we would then contact the business, discuss it with them, make sure that they're aware of the order, indicate that we expect them to comply, and unless there was a second offense that was reported to us, that would probably do it. And if there was, we'd investigate further, and we'd have the opportunity to write a summons if we discovered continued noncompliance. That's been our enforcement mechanism. Do you want to discuss something different than that? So Councilmember Saber, did I see you raising your hand? And then Councilmember Tall?
Yes. Mr. Barzee, since this is a Clay County order and we have only the ability to make it stricter, and I don't see any indication that we want to do that, we're going to be operating under the Clay County order. So I don't understand this discussion about our enforcement of an order that we no longer have in effect because it's been superseded. Can you explain that to me?
Yeah, it's pretty simple. If you want to enforce it, we have to have an order, and we have the absolute legal right to have our own order. It just cannot be less restrictive, but we can absolutely have our own order. Otherwise, we would be enforcing their order. And I don't think we want to get into that.
Right. So the question before you is whether you want to put a special North Kansas City order in place tonight. And if not, then yes, all the enforcement would be by Clay County. Councilmember Tall?
I would vote that we do, because I think if we don't have a way to help make sure that this is happening, then our businesses are going to be closed. That would be the next step. And that would be terrible for our businesses. So I would vote that we do our own order and that we do find a way to help make sure that these rules are being followed. I had a question about the phone line that you were talking about. You said that that's how you had done it before if there was a complaint. Are you talking about starting something new? Is there already a phone number out there that I don't know about?
No, ma'am. We'd refer them to a particular employee with the city at the general city number, and would refer any complaints that we get to that person, and then that person would follow up.
So that
we're not talking about setting up a hotline or anything like that.
Okay.
We would just publicize the number to call.
So there's already a number publicized?
Well, I mean, we would probably use the 274-6000 number at the city and tell people who have a concern to please call that number, indicate what they're calling about, then it would be referred to the appropriate person on staff.
Okay.
Councilmember Smith?
We also throw an email, a specific email.
Yes, sir.
That'll
We'll do it.
that
yes, sir.
Same person. Thank you.
Yes. Councilmember Stewart?
Yeah, a little confusing. I think Anthony is too, the way he looks. I have the same questions, I think. And I agree with the exemptions we like, the carry out, but we are lessening the order from the county. You said we can only make stricter rules, but we're making less rules. And I want them to happen, but can we do that?
Well, I guess my own feeling about that, sir, and if Mr. Barzee wants to jump in, he can, but there still is the matter of interpretation. We're probably the first line of contact from people. They could always contact Clay County. So if somebody had a problem with how Screenland Armor, for example, was handling itself and wanted to call Clay County, and Clay County had a different interpretation, then that might be Clay County to do. But if they called us, we would indicate that the city's interpretation is that, the movie, as long as business ends there at the theater, that the movie can continue until it's over, something like that. You understand? But again, it's a matter of whether you want to issue your own order as the city of North Kansas City, or if you just want to rest on Clay County's. Councilmember Smith, and then Councilmember Clevenger.
To respond to Rick, we're not lessening what they did. We're just reinterpreting some of the gray area in there. The one thing that I would say we're going to go with Clay County's language for the most part, but if we're going to pull that medical exemption off the table, we would need our own order. So I think we go ahead and do it. We go ahead and issue an order. We've got the line to call to complain. We've got the follow-up procedures in place. So I'd say we go ahead and issue an order that mirrors Clay County and removes the medical exemption. And then we know how we've interpreted based on what the discussion has been tonight.
Yeah, I agree with the interpretation of drive-through or somebody else like Helen bringing food out. That's great to me. I just wanted to make sure that we can get by with doing that. So I guess we can. I guess we can't, we'll get a call.
The last item I had down with regard to, Councilmember Clevenger. Yes, sorry.
Yeah, just had one quick question. Thank you for staff for helping us with the interpretation on some of these to help some of these businesses who are getting blindsided with the 10 o'clock closure. When you're talking about enforcement and a specific staff person that you're going to be referring people to, a lot of these are going to occur at night, like for local restaurants or bars or whatever. City staff isn't going to be working at night. Is there a way when they call the main number that they can get to that extension and leave a message for that person, or send the email obviously anytime?
Yes, they could leave a message or send an email, or if somebody feels really strongly, they could call the police dispatch.
Okay, thank you.
The last item I had down had to do with the social worker. I'd respectfully say that that's a much bigger question that should be not really part of the discussion of an emergency order tonight. Whether you add a person to staff or replace a police officer with a different position, I think that's a much larger discussion, which I would respectfully state is just beyond the ability to really have make a decision on tonight. But that's Councilmember Tull and then Councilmember DeLong.
DeLong was first, but do you mind if I respond to that, Bryant? Is that okay?
It's all on you.
Okay. Another thing that was said in our conversations with the hospital is that a big, I think you had said it, you had asked if the homeless population was part of it. That's another thing that we're looking at, and this is impacting the homeless population. I just feel like we need to keep everything on the table if we're looking at how to address this. So that's kind of beyond what a police officer can do for the homeless population. And I'm not trying to get a police officer fired. I was talking about a vacant position. So I'm not trying to fire anybody. I'm just thinking we could really use that type of support in the city with the large homeless population. And COVID doesn't skip over the homeless either.
Councilmember DeLong.
I think at this point, my list is pretty much exhausted. I did see Chief Freeman looked like he had his hand out. It just went down.
It does look like Chief Freeman would like to make a comment. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, sir. The one thing I will say is just talking about these different orders from different jurisdictions is part of the frustration within the metro is some of these inconsistencies. And if we start throwing down additional rules for, and I appreciate the comment, Councilmember Smith, but if we take away the medical exemption, that's going to put us in a really weird spot to enforce that rule, because as you know, most of the time people don't know when they're in North Kansas City and when they're in Kansas City, when they're in Clay County, when they're in Platte County. And the enforcement piece of that is a big concern for me. And just to kind of refresh everybody's memory, when we were in the heart of the lockdowns and early on coming out of it, there was a plan and a process in place with the Clay County Health Department through the Clay County Prosecutor's Office for enforcement of these rules and mandates that came from the health department. You guys all as a body had to enact your own early on because Clay County was not acting. Now that Clay County is acting and is in lockstep with Jackson, Kansas City, and Wyandotte County, I feel like consistency is key here if we're going to enforce it across the board. And in speaking with some of my colleagues in Jackson County and Wyandotte County, the health department is the primary enforcement arm for these orders. The police department does not get involved unless there's a disturbance related to the health department's investigation. So Councilmember Saper, you're kind of spot on in my opinion, as far as like, this is a Clay County order, Clay County should be enforcing it. I understand that North Kansas City can enact their own order and be more restrictive in these instances, but I am concerned about the consistency of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. I tend to agree with the Chief Freeman on that. Mayor Stila.
I agree with him too. If this is a Clay County order, let them, we don't need to add anything to it.
Councilmember Smith.
Yeah, let's go with the chief on that. He understands enforcement a whole lot better than the rest of us do. I shudder to think that we would be depending on Clay County for much of anything, but let's hope that they get this right and that they respond timely to enforcement requests or problems. I still think we need to have something as far as citizen complaints coming in that we can at least relay up to them or to the police department if that's necessary. But yeah, let's just circle all the way back and go with Clay County's order and kick it forward.
Councilmember Tall, and then Councilmember Clark.
One more thing I'm not sure about that I just wanted to clear up. It said seating indoors and outdoors, correct? So I'm thinking specifically chicken and pickle. Instead of everyone standing and congregating in a group, they'll have to convert that outdoor space into seated areas only. Is that correct?
I think that's how we would interpret it. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I was thinking of that the same as you guys.
Councilmember Clark and then Councilmember Smith.
I guess the other thing, there is a site that that Casey Mo put up saying that you can report a violation to 311. Is that something that we could all connect into? Like the cities could all connect into that? It's like an app that you put on your phone to report, addresses or specific locations of violations. Say if you see a big party or things like that. I don't know.
Ma'am, that is specifically a Kansas City, Missouri governmental instrument. Councilmember Smith.
So I know this is going to come up. Being Chicken and Pickle being our biggest entertainment venue, if everyone has to be seated indoor and outdoor, does that remove pickleball as an activity? My interpretation would be no. That's not a bar and restaurant
for people.
That's an extra thing they do there. But they would need to have masks on. They just wouldn't have to sit down to play pickleball.
I would agree.
All right. We can accept the council's consensus interpretation unless I hear something different. So if asked, that's what we'll indicate to them. So I guess the question, or what I think I'm hearing, unless anybody has a motion otherwise, is that Clay County having issued this order tonight, the city council will not issue its own order. Is that correct?
After an hour of discussion, you are correct. We're going to do.
All right. Well, then Councilmember Tall.
Last question. You said if asked, that's what you would tell them. So is the city going to be sending something out to the businesses so that they're aware of the changes that
we will advise them of Clay County's order? Yes, ma'am. And then, but I don't think we're going to try to contact each bit. We'll discuss with Greenland Armor since that's been specifically discussed, but we're not going to try to contact individual businesses to say this is how we're doing this. But I imagine we may get questions, and so your guidance tonight has helped us if and when we get questions.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anything else on this item? All right. Well, shall we move on to item 13?
Absolutely. Item 13, agreement with Northland Festivals, Snake Saturday, resolution number 20-073.
Thank you. I will call on the city councilor, Tom Barzee, and I know that we do have a couple of people, JD Green and Kelly Sales, here from Northland Festivals as well to discuss this item with you. But Tom, would you like to introduce the item?
Sure. And I'll try to make this very short. The agreement's the same as it was in prior years, except there's one big exception. And the big exception I highlighted in my memo. Hopefully everybody had the chance to read it. No sense of me going over it. But basically, if because of COVID-19, it becomes impossible to have the parade in the traditional sense in March, which I'm not going to be a prognosticator, but that's probably the case. It'll be a reverse, if you want to call it, a reverse parade. The floats park along Swift Street and between Armour and 10th. This is in a nutshell. They, cars get to drive by. You drive by to see it, and everybody's enclosed. But JD is here, JD Green, the president of Northland Festivals, and I am sure he would be glad to answer your questions on this.
May I let JD, Mr. Green, go ahead and make a little presentation before we take questions?
Sure.
Go ahead, JD.
First, thanks everyone. It's terrible that we're in this situation of dealing with a pandemic. So to tell you where we came from with this idea, it's not an original idea. McKinney, Texas pulled it off for July 4th this past year. I found out through our insurance company about it. I spoke to the gentleman who put it on. And since then, we've had a meeting with police, fire, and public works before we went forth with this idea. And Kelly's on here. I can tell you right now, she put together a survey and she sent the numbers to me late this afternoon, but we will be down, even with this, we will be down in the number of floats that we have previously had. Off the top of our head, would be down to about 70% of a normal parade. But the idea behind the parade is to put the floats in the middle. Swift would be one way from Armour Road south to 10th Street, and people would drive by. Somewhat similar to a Christmas parade of lights. It would be our way of being able to still collect sponsorship money and distribute it out to all the charities that we give money to each year. So with that,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead and let's have questions.
Councilmember Smith.
JD, I appreciate the time you obviously took to set that memo up, and I read through the whole plan for what we're calling Plan B. But if we're being honest, that is the plan. That would be what would happen. So my thought here is that I recognize the history of Snake Saturday and the vibrancy it brings to the North Kansas City community. It's a big deal here. I hated having to cancel it this year. But really, what beyond the actual doing of the parade, it brings crowds into the city for businesses. They get to have a big sale day, and some businesses, that makes up a huge chunk of their annual revenue, on top of the sponsorships and the other things that go along with it. What I have trouble with is we do now have a vaccine on the horizon, right? We're looking at April for early public distribution, into the summer, likely getting very, very wide distribution. So my thought would be, if we want to have a real party in North Kansas City, why not focus on the fall of 2021 rather than trying to do something that, it could work as a get together, but honestly, it doesn't sound like even a shell of Snake Saturday that I think of, that I look forward to. So if we could push that into the fall, when likely people will have the vaccine, there'll be more safety. And if we do it right, like even if we do it this way, we're still encouraging a crowd of people to come to the city during what will still be a pandemic. So I would encourage us to look toward when we can actually have a party, toward the late summer into the fall.
May I respond to Councilmember Smith?
Oh, please do.
Hey, Kelly Sales, parade chairman here. Absolutely bringing business and exposure to North Kansas City is a main focus for the Snake Saturday Parade. I think our number one focus, though, is to support the 501c3 charities and parade entries that come out to us each and every year. First place winner for our rainbow category, that's our 501c3 charities, is $7,000. That makes or breaks some of our charities. We've had multiple charities write into us and say, if it weren't for the money that I got from Snake Saturday, our charity would be no longer. And so I am incredibly hopeful for a very different fall in 2021 than we are currently having. But I am concerned for our charities who are very, very much struggling through this pandemic. And even if it's in a Plan B format, we still intend on giving the same award money that we have in the past. And that's incredibly important for our charities and for our entries.
Councilmember Clark and then Councilmember Smith.
That is hard. Obviously, I think that just what comes to mind to me nationally is even Mardi Gras, which is a huge charitable fundraiser, has been canceled. I think that was just a key indicator for me when I was reviewing this. It's probably one of the largest parades I've ever known in the States, and that's been canceled. So I think it's just something to consider. And I do absolutely feel for the charities, and I'm hearing you on that. I just think that's where we're in this hard balance. And I would agree that maybe looking toward a fall could be an option, but I understand the toss up there.
Councilmember Smith.
So the charities, Kelly, where does the money come from for the charity donations?
Yeah, absolutely. So the city graciously gives us $44,000, and JD, the hospital, I can't remember the exact number. Is it around 30,000?
Hospital gives 31,000.
31,000. And
the
then
money from the city, none of that is in the prize money. It's the hospital and our sponsors that provide the prize money.
and then also the parade entries. So we have different entry categories. So for example, an automobile club or a commercial entry, if you're joining our parade to promote your business, that's a $350 entry fee. So when we typically have around 25 of those entry fees, that makes up a good chunk of the prize money as well.
Okay. Is there any way to make short of what would come from the parade, if the sponsors are still on board for a fall, like if they could prepay and then we have it in the fall, could we still funnel the money to the charities while waiting until a safer time to actually have the festival?
That's not something that we had considered, but we can certainly speak to the Northland Festival Board about it.
Yeah, I think that may be a good approach. We could table this until we've had that response.
Well, Councilman Smith, let me answer you this way. We gave out the money for the 2020 parade. And we did it based on the longevity or how long a charity has participated with us. And the longer you participated, the more money you got. So could we still do that? That's what we did this past year. And then move the parade to the fall. The one issue that I don't have an answer for is if we had a festival, could we have a carnival? Because the carnivals are booked now. I say that, obviously that hadn't happened this year, so. And we'd be looking for a date.
Councilmember Tall.
I have to agree. I know that it's for a good cause, but it's just not a good time for this to happen. We will not be ready in March. I'm hopeful that we would be ready in the fall, but we don't even know that yet. So I just couldn't support doing the parade even with Plan B as of right now.
So the question before you is whether to approve the agreement with Northland Festivals. Does Councilmember Saper?
Yeah, I have another issue. I have no problem funding an Irish ethnic festival, but I can only offer conditional support until the council in the future also consider supporting other additional ethnic, racial, and other such activities as Hispanic Festival, Black Lives Matter activities, and gay pride events. We will soon have a functioning equity and inclusion committee that'll be a vehicle for curating those efforts and present them to the city council. And until that time, I can only offer very conditional support.
I might ask anybody who's not speaking to mute. Are there any other comments? Does anybody have a motion? Councilmember DeLong?
I mean, it just sounds like there's still some open questions here. Might it be best if we just table this to the next meeting? Can we do that? I mean, I certainly hate to see this not make it through without getting these additional questions answered.
Is there a second?
Second.
Well, then I will move to table this motion officially.
Second.
All right, so it's been moved and seconded to table the motion. I guess what staff would be interested in learning is what you need to bring this back to you for some kind of consideration. What additional questions are you looking to have answered? Councilmember Smith?
I would be looking for potentially a different date, like sometime in the fall, to approve this sort of thing, and then how the money. I think we understand that the money can still flow to the charities, and then we could make it back when we actually have a festival. But looking at potential for other times or dates, rather than voting this down, it seems like we could at least keep it going and then talk about the better timing.
All right.
I'm assuming they need to talk to their sponsors and the other people that are in with the parade as well to see if that's feasible for fall.
JD or Kelly, did you have any other questions or anything prior to the council voting on the motion to table?
Oh, good. Can I say one thing before you have that I thought of? Councilman DeLong, could you modify your motion to table, just to table it rather than to the next meeting? With there being Thanksgiving coming up, I'm a little concerned about getting dates and organizing things and just have it tabled.
I missed a specific. You want me to give a specific date?
I don't think you need to. I think, knowing Mr. Berlin, he will have this back on as soon as we're ready, which could be.
My motion was to table.
It was just a table. He didn't table to a specific date. We'll bring it back when we feel like it's ready to bring back to council for some kind of a possible decision.
I'm sorry. I thought he said until the next meeting. I'm sorry.
So I don't think now I don't remember if I did. If I did, then I retract that portion. I tabled to the next meeting. Done. No, damn it! That time I said it. I moved to table this item. And
yes, sir. So, understood.
Thank you.
Second.
All right. Okay, I think we had a motion in a second. If there's no more discussion, Madam Clerk, will you call the roll?
Councilmember Clevenger.
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Stewart.
Yes.
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Farr,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember DeLong,
Yes.
Councilmember Saper,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Tall.
Yes.
8-0, the motion to table carries. Item number 14, license agreement, Gallery Lofts. Bill number 7563, ordinance number 9360.
Thank you. I'll call on the Community Development Director, Sarah Copeland.
Evening, Mayor and Council. The item before you is a pretty typical encroachment license agreement that the city often enters into, where we have a development that has a slight encroachment into the city's right-of-way. In this case, it's mainly for a handrail for stairs on the front of the proposed Gallery Lofts development and their front stairs. There would also be some buried conduit included here. I would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Move to approve.
Second.
Need a first reading? Right?
Yes, this is the first reading. Please.
All right.
Yes. Councilmember Clevenger,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Smith, or Councilmember Stewart, my apologies.
Yes.
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Farr,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember DeLong,
Yes.
Councilmember Saper,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Tall.
I abstain.
7-0, motion carries. An ordinance adopting and approving a license agreement by and between the city of North Kansas City, Missouri and Gallery Lofts Investor Partner LP, Gallery Lofts, regarding real property generally located immediately north of the real property generally described as 1007 Armour Road in the city of North Kansas City, Missouri.
I move that bill number 7563 be placed on second and final reading and passes ordinance number 9360.
Second.
Second.
Councilmember Clevenger,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Stewart,
Yes.
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Farr,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember DeLong,
Yes.
Councilmember Saper,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Tull.
Abstain.
7-0, motion carries. An ordinance adopting and approving a license agreement by and between the city of North Kansas City, Missouri and Gallery Lofts Investor Partner LP, Gallery Lofts, regarding real property generally located immediately north of the real property generally described as 1007 Armour Road in the city of North Kansas City, Missouri. Item number 15, 8th Amendment, Employment Agreement with Patrick Hover, Bill number 7562, Ordinance number 9359.
Thank you. Our Public Works Director, Pat Hauber, has an employment agreement with the city. I'm recommending that employment agreement be amended to provide Pat a raise in salary that's commensurate with his performance appraisal, his position in the pay quartile for his position according to our compensation program, and the budgeted increase in the fiscal year 2021 city budget for all city employees, and an ordinance is before you accordingly.
First reading.
Second.
Councilmember Clevenger,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Stewart,
Yes.
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Farr,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember DeLong,
Yes.
Councilmember Saper,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Tull.
Yes.
8-0, the motion carries. An ordinance approving and adopting the 8th Amendment addenda to employment agreement by and between the city of North Kansas City, Missouri and Patrick A. Hover, Public Works Director.
I move that bill number 7562 be placed on second and final reading and passes ordinance number 9359.
Second.
Councilmember Clevenger,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Stewart,
Yes.
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Farr,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember DeLong,
Yes.
Councilmember Saper,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Tull.
Yes.
8-0, the motion carries. An ordinance providing and adopting the 8th Amendment addenda to employment agreement by and between the City of North Kansas City, Missouri and Patrick A. Haver, Public Works Director. Item number 16, 2021 Household Hazardous Waste Agreement, Resolution number 2074.
Thank you. The city participates in the Mid-America Regional Council's Household Hazardous Waste Program we have for years. It allows residents to properly dispose of items such as unused paint, household cleaners, motor oil, pesticides, similar items. And so presented for you tonight is an agreement for another year in the program, the 2020-2021 program. And the terms of the agreement are exactly the same as last year. We recommend it to you.
Move to approve.
Second. I love this program.
Councilmember Clevenger,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Stewart,
Yes.
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Farr,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember DeLong,
Yes.
Councilmember Saper,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Tull.
Yes.
8-0, the motion carries. Item 17, ordinance calling for April election. Bill number 7564, ordinance number 9361.
Thank you. For each election, the city is required to pass an ordinance calling for that election. So before you is an ordinance calling for a general election to be held on April 6th, 2021. This year's election will be for a 2-year term to fill the seats in each of the city's 4 wards for 2 years. Also for a 1-year term to fill the seat currently held by Councilmember Clark, and for the office of mayor. The filing for declaration of candidacy will begin on December 15th and end on January 19th, 2021. We recommend approval of the ordinance.
First reading.
Second.
Councilmember Clevenger,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Stewart,
Yes.
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Farr,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember DeLong,
Yes.
Councilmember Saper,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Tull.
Yes.
8-0, the motion carries. An ordinance calling for a general election to be held on April 6, 2021, for the purpose of electing 1 qualified council member from each of the 4 wards, 1 qualified council members from Ward 4 to serve a 1-year term, and the mayor in the city of North Kansas City, Missouri.
I move that bill number 7564 be placed on second and final reading and passes bill number, or ordinance, bill number 7564 and passes ordinance number 9361.
Second.
I'm not as good as,
Councilmember Clevenger,
yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Stewart,
Yes.
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Farr,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember DeLong,
Yes.
Councilmember Saper,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Tull.
Yes.
8-0, the motion carries. An ordinance calling for a general election to be held on April 6, 2021, for the purpose of electing 1 qualified council member from each of the 4 wards, 1 qualified council member from Ward 4 to serve a 1-year term, and the mayor in the city of North Kansas City, Missouri. Item number 18, extension of time, agreement for appraisal services, resolution number 2075.
Thank you. I will note that the Third Amendment to this agreement does indicate that it'll continue in force until June 16th, 2020, which is obviously a typographical error. So I'll call on the City Councilor, Tom Barzee, to explain this item to you, and I'd ask you, Tom, to address the expiration date. Go ahead, Tom.
Right. As you may recall, this is part of the beautification project along a block along Burlington, and Mr. Al Donahoe of Al Donahoe and Associates was hired by the city to do two main things: to appraise the property interests that need to be acquired, whether they be temporary construction easement, permanent easements, or in some cases actually right of way. This is his part. His second requirement is to negotiate with each of the property owners a fair market value for each of the interests being acquired. We need to extend the time for several reasons. One of which, or at least we're asking that the time be extended so he can complete this work. Part of the problem has been, I had to first prepare, it seemed kind of strange because this is up and down Missouri Highway property. It seemed kind of strange that MoDOT did not have they wanted to have us draft the easements and the deeds, if you will, for each of these and be able for them to take a look at them rather than them providing us a particular form. I provided those through Ms. Copeland to MoDOT. They took a while in reviewing it. 2 months ago now, they got back and they said they were okay. They had a change. They wanted the city to acquire all of them, all the interest, and not the right of way in the name of MoDOT, or technically in the name of the Missouri Highways and Transportation Commission, which is fine with us. They wanted to see the project completed before they were signed over to them. Then I requested of the city's engineer for this project, Olson, that they provide to me the legal descriptions for each and every one of these interests, as well as the survey drawing, as well as their title reports, so I would know who are the property interest owners. I got that a month ago and have started the process, but there are a significant number of parcels of property. This is because some property owners have more than one, and I've printed out, about half of them now, and I've already used up like a ream of paper to give you an idea of how thick this is. And from that, I have to go through and draft a separate a deed or easement for each of them before Mr. Donahoe can go to a property owner and make any kind of an offer. So we need to extend I am requesting that you extend the time of this contract so that he is not out of it. And I apologize for the typographical error. That purely was my fault, and don't mind admitting it, but that's what it's about. I'd be glad to answer any questions you have. But this is all of the properties up and down Burlington that on both the east and or west side of Burlington, and a few that touch even into Armour Road, and then on the north end of Burlington as well.
Move to approve with the correct expiration date in 2021.
Second.
Councilmember Clevenger.
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Stewart.
Yes.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
Councilmember Farr.
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember DeLong.
Yes.
Councilmember Saper.
Since I don't approve of this project, I am voting no.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Tull.
Yes.
7-1, the motion carries. Number 19, approving accounts due and payable by the city through November 13th, 2020. Bill number 7565, ordinance number 9362.
First reading.
Second.
Councilmember Clevenger.
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Stewart.
Yes.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
Councilmember Farr.
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember DeLong.
Yes.
Councilmember Saper.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Tull.
Yes.
8-0, the motion carries. An ordinance authorizing payment for certain accounts due and payable by the city through November 13th, 2020.
I move that bill number 7565 be placed on second and final reading and passes ordinance number 9362.
Second.
Councilmember Clevenger.
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Stewart.
Yes.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
Councilmember Farr.
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember DeLong.
Yes.
Councilmember Saper.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Tull.
Yes.
8-0, the motion carries. An ordinance authorizing payment for certain accounts due and payable by the city through November 13th, 2020. Number 20, staff comments.
Thank you. There are a couple of written reports in your packet, upcoming city items of note, Northland Assistance Center monthly CARES fund report. And at this point, I will call on the Assistant City Administrator, Kim Nakahoto, to make a report.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'd just like to kind of bring you up to speed on a project that our municipal court services has implemented. We are now offering virtual court, and last night was our second offering of that service. Our hope is to transition as many of those cases to be heard in front of the judge as possible to the virtual court Zoom platform. So the first couple of times, as you can imagine, we had some lessons learned. But we are definitely finding our groove. We would like to thank the City of Kansas City Municipal Court for allowing us to sit and learn the process so we could smoothly implement it within our own court. So I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes staff comments. We'll continue with council member comments and begin with council member Clevenger.
Okay, definitely, I'll make them short as well. First of all, wanted to let people know that Bryant and myself are attending the National League of Cities City Summit, and it's virtual, obviously, so hoping to bring back some good information for our city. I wanted to thank also Dr. Righteous with the North Kansas City Hospital for meeting with council members via Zoom, introducing himself, kind of letting us know what's going on with the hospital. He was a good resource for what's going on with COVID and what's happening in our community. Like Lisa said earlier, and what I would think would be a good idea is, if possible, we could get him to come maybe once a month during this crisis to kind of let us know what's going on in the community and in the hospital in our community. So I don't know if that's a possibility, but someone can reach out to the hospital about that. Want to wish also everybody a happy Thanksgiving. Some of us aren't going to be with our families this year, and we just got to try to get through it. It sucks. COVID is changing everything, but a lot of things we've just got to grin and bear. I understand, Clay County coming in, we would like to be able to have control over our own city, but we also want to have uniformity. So I'm glad we could have a rational and informed discussion on that tonight. And let's see. Also, the leaf guys all continue doing a great job throughout the city, sucking up the leaves. And that's all I've got tonight.
Councilmember Stewart.
Just one thing, really. When does that leaf vacuuming quit? Because I noticed the trees are about there. And somebody asked me today, and I said, I can't remember.
Pat Harbor, can you comment?
I can. It varies every year. Sometimes like December 10th will be done. And so I'd say it'd be between December 10th and December 18th, because the leaves will all be down. They're almost all down, but we continue, residents continue raking their backyards out to the curb. So we can't give you an exact date, but that's a pretty good idea of when we can do it.
Okay, thank you. And I know I said one thing, but I remembered, I want to thank the high school kids that came down and raked a lot of yards for free. I don't know how many neighborhoods they did, but that's, that's really a nice program they have there. And I have to say thank you to the city crews. And I don't know who Pat gave the job to, but I emailed Pat Sunday, so I didn't forget Monday, and told him about a big limb out of the city tree. It fell in this woman's yard as she's 90-some years old. And I went down and drug it out of her driveway and the sidewalk, and I asked the city to pick it up. And 7:30 Monday morning, it was gone. And she really appreciates it. She's 90-some years old, still lives by herself, drives, but she couldn't manage that tree. So thank you very much.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes, I too will echo the gratitude for the leaf pickup. I was one of those late night scoopers to the road on Sunday night, not knowing that they were going to come Monday. So it was just like a fun little present. And they probably knocked it out around 7:30, about right. I don't know how they do it, Rich, because they're everywhere. I just want to say congrats to both Francis and Yvonne for joining, being the newer members to the Equity and Inclusion Committee. Pretty excited for Yvonne to be involved, and she's pretty stoked too. She's pretty new to the community. She's been here since about April, it's about 8 months. So she's safe to be on the committee, but I'm very stoked for her to join up in this role. And that's it.
Councilmember Farr.
Just wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. Remember now, don't let more than 10 people in your house, according to Clay County. That's all. Thank you.
Councilmember DeLong.
I just want to address one thing we passed earlier tonight, the household hazardous waste. And just remind people what all you can do with that. You can take unused paint, household cleaners, motor oil, pesticides, and anything along those lines to the facility right across the, I'm going to get the name of the bridge wrong. Is that a Chateau Bridge? Right over in Kansas City, Missouri.
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
4707 Damaris Avenue over in Kansas City. So just across the bridge there if you want to get rid of those materials. That's all I got.
Councilmember Saper.
Yeah, I have a problem about how we conduct our council meetings. This is nothing personal, Mr. Berlin. You efficiently and fairly moved the council through the agenda. But there is something fundamentally wrong about city staff conducting the council meeting. This is a task and privilege for the mayor elected by the people. After all, it's the people's city council. I would hope we could correct this.
I'm happy to do it any way the council would like. When we began doing these meetings by Zoom, I discussed this with the mayor, and this is what we came up with. But if the mayor would prefer to take over that role, I'd be happy to, or I'd be happy to continue doing it. Councilmember Smith.
A few things from me. So kind of off of what Tony was just saying, I sent an email to Eric and Tom Barzee this week. I just wanted to talk a little bit about meeting efficiency. We're going on 2 hours and 8 minutes at this point. Most of these meetings have gone 2 to 3 hours plus work sessions and executive sessions. A lot of it does have to do with conversations and back and forths. But I've also asked that staff members who present items, that they keep it to a need to know basis. We've already gotten the agenda. We've gotten memos. I believe members of this council are doing their homework. They're coming with good discussion topics. We really, really don't need somebody to reread the memo that we've already gotten. I know that there's some disclosure to the public. The public can also download and view the agenda and the attachments. So I would implore, please, staff and Tom, if you're presenting an item, keep it high level. We've got the supporting docs, and we'll be happy to ask any questions that come up during that review. I think that would help move these along a lot more efficiently. Second thing, if you are still not wearing a mask, you are a problem to the community. Put your mask on, stop complaining, and do your part. Third, Thanksgiving's coming up. Everybody, I want to wish you a very happy Thanksgiving. Please follow what the CDC is asking you to do. Do not have people outside of your household in your home for Thanksgiving. Please take that seriously. Your family is not magically safer than the general public. You could, even worse, infect your own family and have an outbreak with all of that. So just please play by the rules this Thanksgiving. Next year, hopefully things will be very different. And third, yes, thank you very much to those high schoolers. I saw them out raking the leaves. That is phenomenal. It's great community service. They've most, if not all of them, had masks on, even if they were outside, just doing good in the community. So thanks everybody for that.
Councilmember Tall.
Yeah, Pat, if you're still on, we had a neighborhood HOA meeting, and a few things that kept coming up are the alleys and the sidewalks. And I know there is a plan for addressing those. So I'm just going to contact you this week and make sure that I understand what that is so I can tell the people in the neighborhood. And then the other part that I wanted to address is I just want to recognize that this is a really hard time for our healthcare workers and our businesses, big and small, and that we're with you on that. We're going to do our part to wear our masks and try to flatten the curve. I know we're up there at capacity, and businesses, we heard from you too. Thank you for the emails and the phone calls and telling us what was reasonable and unreasonable. I wish we could help you out a little more than we did, but we're going to look for ways to support you. So thank you, and everybody have a great Thanksgiving.
Mayor Stila.
I think it's all been said.
Item 23. Thank you.
Item number 23, consideration of a request to hold and recess into an executive session as requested by the city councilor to be held on this date on a real estate matter pursuant to Missouri Revised Statutes 610.0212.
So moved.
Second.
Councilmember DeLong, did you have a question?
Yeah, no, it was more a comment. I'll end up voting no on this. I've thought about it. I'm not sure if I really connected the dots with how public knowledge of this transaction would adversely affect the legal consideration. So we'll be voting no on this.
Do what?
Do what?
I didn't understand.
So this is section 2, right? Leasing, purchase, or sale of real estate by a public governmental body where public knowledge of the transaction might adversely affect the legal consideration therefore. And I'm not sure what negative impact public knowledge of this, having this as a public discussion, where that public knowledge would adversely impact the legal consideration of what we're discussing.
Okay.
All right, so it's there. I believe there's been a motion and a second. Am I correct?
Yes.
All right.
Can Tom speak to that, if at all? I mean, that's a fair question.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Barzee.
Maybe you better restate the question so I understand it completely and correctly.
Brian, would you like me to restate the question?
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I thought he said he was gonna. Okay. So we're going to executive session, and based on 610.021, section 2, it says leasing, purchase, or sale of real estate by a public governmental body where public knowledge of the transaction might adversely affect the legal consideration therefore. I understand the first part of that is fine. Leasing, purchase, or sale of real estate, fine. Where I question this is where the public knowledge of this transaction would adversely affect the legal consideration.
For example, you're discussing the settlement of a lawsuit. Okay?
But we're not discussing a lawsuit though.
No, I mean, for example, if you're discussing the settlement of a lawsuit, you don't want to discuss that in public.
I would agree with that, but that is not the section we're going into executive session for.
Yeah, Tom, this one would be hard for you to answer directly without talking about what the topic is. But I would agree with Bryant. I don't think there's any reason that this can't be a public discussion.
I guess I would say it hasn't been published. So if you're not willing to have the executive session on the matter, we would have to defer the item to an open meeting.
Right.
I would also just venture that based upon whatever you might indicate to us in the executive session, it will be coming to you in an open meeting for some kind of a vote. But we did think that for the initial discussion, it being a real estate matter, that it was an appropriate matter to discuss in executive session. If the council doesn't think so, we'll simply move it forward to the open meeting and have the entire discussion in public.
This is a time sensitive matter though, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, we need to have the discussion.
Let's vote on the motion.
Yeah, let's vote on the motion.
Councilmember Clevenger,
Yes, ma'am, for executive session.
Councilmember Stewart,
Yes.
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Farr,
Yes.
Councilmember DeLong,
No.
Councilmember Saper,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
No.
Councilmember Tull.
No.
5-3, the motion carries.
All right, so you have received an email a short time ago, and if you could go to that link to take us into the executive session.
It's not it's not clickable.
Is that right? So you received an email from Stephen Roberts. I haven't tried to click on it, but
Yeah, I have, and I'm looking at it. There's nothing in blue.
I am seeing it. I haven't tried to click on it yet, but it is in blue.
Well, mine's
Stephen?
not.
Stephen, could you try resending or doing something, or Kim?
Hey, Rick,
Yeah,
have you tried to actually tap on it yet?
I've opened the email.
Okay, did you actually tap on what the link would be if it was blue?
Oh, let's see.
Oh.
Yeah, I just did.
You got
Huh?
I sent you the same thing. I sent it to everybody else. I just, let's see, how could we? The only thing I could tell you to do would be highlight it and copy it and paste it if you could.
Yep.
You're using your iPad though.
No. Oh, wait a minute. Let me. I'm going to have to leave. I was actually looking at my computer.
Okay.
Hang on.
1, 2, 3, 4. What, we need one more?
Yeah.
One more.
Or one of us got to vote twice.
What are your bets, folks? What are your bets? Is it going to be Judge Fuller?
Here we go.
Yeah.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Good night.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye all.
Bye.